We don't usually notice the moment someone decides to sit differently in their own life. Sometimes it's as small as an empty chair that stays empty a little too long. This is how she remembers it. I'm Izzy Rowan. Most people call me Izzy. I design interiors for a living, which means I make quiet decisions that other people live inside for years. That morning, I stood in my apartment in Evanston, holding a dress against my body. Already tired and the day hadn't started yet. My phone lit up on the counter. Don't be late. My mother's message read, "Everyone's already asking where you are." I typed back, "Leaving now," and set the phone face down. The dress wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to be. Pale, clean lines. Something that wouldn't compete with pastel balloons or attention. I slipped it on, checked the mirror once, then looked away. Mirrors before family events had a way of turning into interrogations. When I arrived at the conservatory by the lake, the place was already humming. White flowers, soft music, conversations layered over each other like fabric swatches that almost matched. My mother spotted me immediately. "There you are," she said, fingers already adjusting my sleeve. "You're a little flushed. It's warm outside." She smiled, the kind that corrected more than it comforted. "Well, try to relax. Today isn't about you." I nodded. I always did. Corinne was across the room, glowing in pale blue, surrounded by people leaning in close. When she saw me, she lifted a hand in a small wave, then turned back to her guests. A woman near the gift table glanced at me. "You must be the sister." "That's me." She smiled politely. "So creative. Corinne talks about you all the time." I thanked her and set my gift down. The chair beside the table was empty. I sat there anyway. Someone else leaned in. "And what about you? Still keeping busy?" "Very." "That's nice," she said, already looking past me. At the mimosa station, a man I didn't recognize stood with a young girl who was carefully lining up napkins. "Please don't touch the glasses," he told her quietly. She looked up at me instead. "They're slippery." "They are." I agreed. He smiled, brief and tired. "I'm Theo. Sorry if she's in the way." "She's fine." Across the room, my mother clinked a spoon against her glass. The sound cut cleanly through the chatter. "Everyone," she called. "Let's gather. We at Revenge Sins have seen this moment before, the way a room tightens before anyone knows why." I stood, smoothing my dress, and walked toward my sister, already feeling the familiar pull to make myself smaller. We gathered around Corinne like gravity pulled us there. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conservatory, her silhouette framed by the gray Evanston mist. One hand rested on her stomach, a deliberate maternal gesture, while the other accepted congratulations as if motherhood were a residency program she'd already topped. In this room, voices were kept low, the way people talk when they want their judgments to sound like concerns. "You look radiant, Corinne," someone murmured. She smiled, that effortless, practiced glow. "Thank you. It's a lot to balance with the hospital, but we're beyond excited." My mother hovered at her side, a self-appointed press secretary. She barely sits down, still doing full rounds at the hospital and leading that pediatric research rotation. So dedicated. She glanced at me, her smile tightening. Focus runs in the family, though it manifests differently in each daughter. I stood 3 steps back, close enough to be a sister, far enough to be a ghost. Mrs. Keller, a woman whose pearls were as sharp as her memory, touched my arm. "Izzy Rowan. It's been ages. Hi, Mrs. Keller." She tilted her head, her gaze sweeping over my understated dress. "You look well." Still doing that, decorating interior design. "Yes, I just finished a project in Lincoln Park." "That's good," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's very important to have something to keep you occupied while everyone else is moving into the next stage of life." I took a sip of water. The ice clinked against the glass, a sharp, solitary sound. At the refreshment table, My cousin Rebecca paused. She didn't look at my face first. She looked at my left hand, finding it empty. She let out a small, pitying breath. Still just you, Izzy. Yes. Well, she laughed softly. I suppose someone has to be the cool aunt who travels. Right, plenty of time. Across the room. Corinne's gaze flicked toward the entrance. Her expression shifted less maternal, more professional. She waved over a tall man standing by the mimosa station. This was Thomas Caldwell. I'd heard his name. The Boston prodigy Corinne had been trying to recruit for her research team to boost her department's standing. Theo stepped forward, his hand resting on the shoulder of a young girl with observant eyes. "Theo, you made it," Corinne said, her voice projecting just enough for the room to hear. "I was telling the board how lucky we are to have your clinical perspective. She wasn't just hosting a shower, she was networking. Thanks for the invite, Corinne," Theo said, his voice a calm, low baritone that seemed to ground the flighty energy of the room. Childcare fell through, but Corinne insisted Nora was welcome. "Of course," my mother chimed in, leaning toward Nora. "It's important for children to see family milestones. It teaches them what truly matters." Theo nodded once, a polite, non-committal gesture. His eyes met mine, not with pity, but with a quiet, analytical stillness. He looked like a man who spent his life looking for symptoms, and for a second, I felt like he'd spotted mine. The clink of a spoon against glass cut through the air. "Let's all take our seats," my mother announced. "We're starting." I headed for the empty chair near the gift table. It sat apart from the main rows, overlooked and solitary. I sat down, smoothed the fabric of my dress, and prepared to be invisible for the rest of the hour. The chairs filled in slowly, not all at once. A few people hovered, still finishing conversations, still adjusting bags and jackets. I stayed where I was, hands folded, watching Corinne take her seat at the front like it had been assigned. Theo and Nora ended up 2 rows over, close enough that I could hear her whispering. "Do we have to sit still the whole time?" she asked. He leaned down. "As long as you can. If it gets hard, squeeze my hand." She tested that immediately, then nodded, satisfied. My mother passed out little slips of paper and pencils for a game. "Just for fun," she said brightly. "Nothing serious." The paper landed in my lap. I didn't look at it right away. Rebecca leaned over from the other side. "You're good at these things. You always were." "I am." She smiled thinly. "Creative stuff." I glanced at the paper. "Guess the baby's arrival date." I wrote something random and set the pencil down. Across the aisle, Nora had turned her paper sideways and was drawing instead. Theo watched for a moment, then murmured something I couldn't hear. She erased quickly and started over. Corinne stood again to thank everyone for coming. Her voice was steady, practiced. "It really means a lot." She said, "Seeing everyone here, work's been intense, but moments like this remind me why it's all worth it." People nodded. Someone murmured agreement. My mother dabbed at her eyes. "You're going to be such a good mother." Theo shifted slightly in his chair. Not uncomfortable, just alert. When Corinne sat back down, she caught sight of him and smiled. "Theo, I'm glad you could make it. And Nora, too." Nora beamed. "I like your flowers." "Thank you. I picked them myself." "They're all the same color." Nora observed. "That was on purpose." Nora considered this, then nodded, as if filing the information away. Theo leaned closer to her. "Remember what we talked about?" "I know," she whispered. Inside voice. I smiled despite myself. The woman next to me leaned over. "Who's that, a colleague of Corinne's?" I said. "Oh," she replied. Interesting. The word hung there, unfinished. Someone cleared their throat near the front. A spoon tapped a glass. "Lighter this time." "All right," my mother announced. "Let's start with a few words." I straightened in my chair, a familiar tightening in my chest. Not dread. Something quieter. The sense that once things started moving, they wouldn't slow down again. My mother went first. She always did. She stood, smoothing the front of her dress, eyes already shiny. "Thank you all for coming. It means so much to our family to see so many familiar faces here today." She turned toward Corinne. "We've watched her grow into such a thoughtful, hard-working woman, and now, watching her become a mother." Her voice wavered just enough to invite sympathy. "It's everything." There was a gentle applause, a few murmurs of agreement. Corinne stood next. She waited for the room to quiet, then smiled the smile everyone knew. Calm, confident, practiced. "I didn't expect this," she began. "Being surrounded by all of you like this." She glanced at my parents, then at the circle of colleagues. "Between residency and research, life's been busy, exhausting, honestly. But this," she rested a hand on her stomach, "this makes it all feel worth it." More nodding. Someone dabbed their eyes. She thanked her friends, her co-workers, her husband. Each name landed exactly where it should. When she reached the end, her gaze shifted. "To my sister," she said, turning toward me. "Izzy." Every head turned. I stood slowly, heart already beating faster. I hadn't planned anything. I hadn't needed to. A few honest sentences felt like enough. "I'm really happy for you," I said. "I know how hard you've worked and how much this means to you." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "You're going to bring that same dedication into motherhood." I lifted my glass slightly. To Corinne, and to the baby. That was it. Simple. Clean. Applause followed. Polite. Brief. I started to sit, but Corinne reached for the microphone again. "Thank you, Izzy," she said, her tone warm. "That means a lot." She smiled, then let out a small laugh. "You know, growing up, everyone assumed Izzy would be the first to do all this. Marriage, kids, the whole thing." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the room. "I guess life has a way of surprising us." I stayed standing, glass still in my hand. Corinne continued, her voice light. "Motherhood changes you in ways people without families just can't fully understand." She paused, eyes flicking toward me. "But I'm sure Izzy understands. In her own way." The laughter didn't come this time. Instead, there was a scrape of a chair. A spoon tapped against a plate. Someone cleared their throat, then stopped. The air shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. My mother moved quickly. "Oh, honey," she said, laughing too loudly. She didn't mean it like that. You know how pregnancy brain can be. Corinne smiled, relieved. I set my glass down on the table in front of me. The sound was soft, but it carried. I looked at my sister. You don't get to decide whose life has meaning. No one spoke. For a moment, I thought my mother might say something else. She didn't. I turned away, picked up my bag, and walked toward the doors. Behind me. Conversation tried to restart. Not smoothly, not convincingly. The room didn't follow. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face, and felt the quiet settle in. The doors closed behind me with a soft click. Not dramatic, just final enough. Outside, the lake sat still, gray-blue and quiet. A few benches lined the path. I took the first one I saw and sat down, my hands shaking now that no one was watching. I hadn't cried yet. That came later. First, there was the heat in my face, the buzzing in my ears, the feeling that I'd left something unfinished behind me and didn't care. Footsteps approached on the gravel. I didn't look up. "Are you okay?" The voice was small, careful. I glanced over. Nora stood a few feet away, holding the edge of her cardigan like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be here. "I'm okay," I told her automatically. She frowned. You don't look okay. I let out a short breath. You're very observant. My dad says feelings show up in people's shoulders. She shrugged, demonstrating. Yours are doing this. That almost did it. Before I could respond, Theo appeared, slower this time, like he didn't want to crowd the moment. I'm sorry, he said. She wandered off. It's fine. He looked from Nora to me, then back. We can go. Nora shook her head. She's sad. Theo crouched beside her. Sometimes people need space. Nora considered that, then looked at me again. Do you want space? I shook my head. You can stay. She sat down next to me, close but not touching. Her shoes didn't quite reach the ground. Theo stayed standing, hands in his pockets. Not pacing, not hovering. Just there. I heard some of it, he said quietly. Inside. I nodded once. Nora swung her feet. Grown-ups say things and then pretend they didn't. That happens, I said. My mom used to do that when she was tired. Nora added. Then she would say, sorry later. Theo's jaw tightened for a second. He smoothed it out quickly. I'm sorry, he said again. This time it wasn't about Nora. Thank you. We sat like that for a minute. The lake, the air, the sounds from inside muffled now, like they belonged to another event entirely. I don't usually come to things like this. Theo offered, but Corinne insisted. She can be persuasive. A corner of his mouth lifted. So, I've noticed. Nora leaned closer to me. You were brave. I looked at her. How do you know that? She shrugged. You said a true thing, even when everyone got quiet. Theo closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. She's not wrong. Inside. Someone laughed too loudly. The sound didn't reach us properly. For the first time since arriving, my shoulders dropped. Just a little. We re-entered the conservatory quietly, the heavy glass doors muffling the lake's wind behind us. Nora walked a step ahead, her hand occasionally brushing the hem of my dress as if checking that I was still there. Theo followed a half-step behind, a silent, grounding presence that shielded us from the immediate gaze of the room. Corinne was in the center of a dense circle near the gift table, mid-laugh, her hands animated. The crowd was tight, a bottleneck of silk and champagne. I need water. Daddy, Nora whispered, looking toward the refreshment station. The pitcher is right there, sweetheart, Theo said, pointing to the edge of the mahogany table. Nora navigated the sea of legs toward the silver tray. At that exact moment, my cousin Rebecca turned sharply to gesture toward a gift, her elbow catching a passing server's arm. The tray jolted. A glass of dark hibiscus punch didn't just tip. Nora tried to catch it, accidentally batting it forward. The liquid arched through the air, dark and aggressive, splashing directly across the pale blue expanse of Corinne's maternity dress. The room didn't just go quiet, it became a vacuum. Oh, God, no! Corinne gasped, jumping back. Her hands hovered over her stomach, fingers fluttering uselessly. This is silk crepe. It's ruined. I'm so sorry, Nora whispered, her face going ashen. My mother rushed forward with a colored cocktail napkin. Quick, rub it before it soaks in. Don't touch it, I snapped. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the frequency of a command. The room flinched. I was already there, snatching a stack of white, undyed linen napkins. If you rub it, you'll fray the fibers and lock the pigment in. Corinne stared at me. Her professional mask cracked. Izzy, it's silk, I know exactly what it is, I said, dropping to one knee. Blot. Only, don't smear. I pressed the white cloth firmly against the blue silk, watching the red liquid wick into the linen. Someone get me soda water. Now. The carbonation will lift the stain out of the weave. A guest scrambled to hand me a bottle. My mother reached for it. Should we find a hairdryer? To dry it fast, no heat, I said. my focus never leaving the fabric. Heat will cook the sugars and set the stain permanently. Just let me work. The shift in the room was palpable. The pity was gone, replaced by a strange academic fascination. I worked methodically, press, lift, move to a clean spot, repeat. Theo stood a few feet away, keeping the crowd back. He wasn't watching the dress, he was watching my hands. Finally, the deep red faded into a barely there shadow. It will need a professional dry cleaner to finish it, I said, standing up and smoothing my own hair. But the structure is safe. It'll come out. Corinne exhaled, a shaky, uneven sound. Thank you, Izzy. I didn't know what to do. I looked at Nora, who was still trembling. It was a crowded room. Nora, it wasn't your fault. Theo crouched beside his daughter, but his eyes stayed on mine. Not impressed, not surprised, just steady, as if he'd finally seen the person I'd been trying to hide all morning. At Revenge Sins, we know that true power isn't in the toast you give. It's in being the only person who knows what to do when the perfection starts to bleed. I didn't stay long after that, long enough for the room to settle, long enough for my hands to dry, not long enough to pretend everything had smoothed over. I was stacking used napkins near the kitchen when Corinne appeared beside me. Close, too close. Can we talk? She said. Not a question, a statement that expected compliance. I set the napkins down and turned to face her. She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. That was unnecessary. The punch, I said. The leaving, the scene. I stepped outside. You corrected me in front of everyone, she replied. And then you came back with him. With who? She exhaled sharply. Theo. He's a colleague. A new one. People notice things like that. I didn't invite him. That's not the point. Her voice dropped. This was my day. I agreed. That's why I kept my toast short. She flinched at that. Just a little. You didn't have to make it about you, she said. I leaned back against the counter. I didn't. You did. Her eyes narrowed. I was joking. Everyone knew that. They knew to stay quiet. She shook her head. You're being sensitive. I've been patient, I said. There's a difference. She opened her mouth, then closed it, tried again. You don't understand what it's like. I met her gaze. You don't get to decide whose life has meaning. The words landed differently here. No audience. No escape. My mother appeared in the doorway. What's going on? Corinne turned immediately. She's upset over nothing, and now she's snapping at me. I stayed where I was. I'm not snapping. I'm done shrinking. Helen frowned. This isn't the time. It never is, I replied. She pressed her lips together. Your sister is pregnant. I know. That doesn't make her words harmless. Corinne scoffed. So now I'm the villain. No, I said. You erased me. That's different. The room went quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. My mother looked between us, hesitation flickering across her face. She didn't choose a side. She didn't correct anything. That was answer enough. I picked up my bag. I'm leaving, I said. Not to punish anyone, to take care of myself. Corinne's voice softened. Just barely. You're overreacting. I'm reacting accurately. I walked past her, past my mother, out through the side door, in the parking lot. The air felt clearer. My hands were steady this time as I unlocked my car. Time didn't pass in a single sweep. It moved in jagged fragments. It was the silence of phone calls unreturned and the focused hum of my studio in Evanston, where I buried myself in blueprints and textiles to fill the space where family used to be. 2 years later, the golden child was tarnished by reality. I saw Corinne at my parents' house in early spring. The air was crisp, but the atmosphere inside was humid with the chaos of young children. Miles. Now 2. was a blur of motion, his socks skidding on the hardwood. June, only 8 months old, was a heavy weight on my mother's lap. One tiny sock missing and her eyes glazed with the need for a nap that wouldn't come. Corinne stood at the kitchen island, her hair pulled back into a messy, utilitarian knot. Her shoulders, once so rigid with pride, were slumped in the unmistakable posture of chronic burnout. Between her final year of residency and 2 toddlers, the perfectionist had finally met a force she couldn't outschedule. "Coffee," she asked, her voice raspy. She reached for a mug before I could answer. She poured it black, then paused, her hand trembling slightly as she remembered. She splashed in some milk. "Right. You like the cream. I forgot. Sorry. It's fine. Corinne." She leaned heavily against the counter, watching Miles collide with a sofa cushion. "He's been like that since 5 o'clock a.m. I just finished a 24-hour shift. I feel like I'm vibrating." Later, outside. The air was clearer. Theo stood with me by the fence, watching the chaos with the practiced calm of a pediatrician who had seen it all. He held a bubble wand for Miles, who shrieked with delight. "He has your sister's energy," Theo noted quietly, "and none of her impulse control." I added, Nora sat nearby, meticulously organizing smooth river stones. "These are the cool neutrals," she announced, gesturing to a row of gray rocks. "The browns are the warm accents." I smiled. "You're organizing by chromatic value now. That's sophisticated." "Nora," she beamed, "you said every space needs a palette." Inside. The house finally settled into a fragile mid-afternoon lull. Corinne found me alone in the kitchen. There was no audience this time, no microphones, just the hum of the refrigerator. "I owe you an apology," she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of the superior lilt she'd used at the shower. "You were brave first, Izzy. You lived the life you wanted. And I punished you for it because I was terrified of failing the life I was supposed to want." She rubbed her face, looking at her red-rimmed eyes in the reflection of the microwave. "I thought if I did everything perfectly, I'd be safe. Now I'm just tired. All the time." I didn't offer a platitude. I just nodded. My mother appeared in the doorway, holding a sleeping June. The judgment in her eyes had been replaced by a weary sort of clarity. "I realize now," she said softly, "that I used my worry for you as a mask for my own lack of respect. I'm sorry for that. Isabel." At dinner. My father didn't make a speech. He simply reached over and placed the best cut of the roast on my plate, a silent, salt-of-the-earth white flag. Theo caught my eye from across the table. He didn't smile, but the way he looked at me felt like an arrival. I wasn't the creative sister anymore. I was just Izzy. And for the first time in 36 years, that was more than enough. The late afternoon light in Evanston turned a dusty gold, stretching across the yard like a well-placed accent rug. The house felt settled, not silent, but breathed in. Chairs were pushed back at odd angles, plates were stacked in neat porcelain towers, and a discarded cardigan hung over the porch railing. Forgotten on purpose, Miles was a miniature engine of joy, toddling across the lawn with a bubble wand far too large for his grip. Nora followed him, her steps measured and patient, narrating his progress as if he were the most important project she had ever managed. June remained a warm, rhythmic weight against my chest, her breathing evening out into a deep, milky sleep. A few yards away, Theo stood by the grill with my father. They weren't discussing medicine or career milestones. They were talking about the steady physics of charcoal timing, heat, and the patience required for things to cook when you don't rush the process. Corinne stepped onto the deck, holding 2 condensation-slicked glasses. She handed one to me with a nod that felt like a quiet truce. "I don't expect us to be fixed, Izzy," she said, her voice dropping below the children's laughter. Family trees are messy, but I'm done pretending I have the only map that leads somewhere. I took a sip of the cold tea. That's enough for today. Corey. She leaned back against the railing, her face softening. It wasn't the radiant, staged glow of the baby shower 2 years ago. It was the steady, honest relief of someone who had stopped trying to outrun her own exhaustion. Inside, through the screen door. I watched my mother. She was moving through the kitchen with a new, quiet rhythm, folding napkins and boxing up leftovers. She paused in the doorway, her eyes finding mine. I'm learning that my worry was just another way of trying to control the floor plan of your life, she said, her voice small but clear. I'm trying to listen more, even to the silence. It helps, I replied, more than you know. As the sun dipped behind the Craftsman roof lines, Theo walked over and reached for my hand. It wasn't a possessive gesture or a claim. It was a connection. Ready? He asked. Yeah, I said. Just a minute more. The drive back to our house was quiet. As we pulled into the driveway, the smart lighting system I'd programmed kicked on soft, warm lumens that highlighted the architectural bones of the home we were building. It was a space I had designed with intention, mid-century modern lines that respected the Victorian history of the house, much like how we respected the histories we brought with us. Nora kicked off her shoes by the door and went straight to the living room. She ran a hand over a new velvet cushion we'd added to the sectional. The texture is perfect. Izzy, she said, looking up at me. It fits exactly where it's supposed to. It does. I agreed. After the children were tucked away, I stood in the kitchen alone. There was no noise, no audience, and no lingering need to prove my worth. For years, I had moved through my own life as if I were a guest, constantly checking my watch, terrified that I was early, late, or paused on the wrong floor. I thought life only made sense if it followed a pre-drawn blueprint. What I see now is a different kind of structure. My name is Izzy Rowan. I didn't arrive late. I arrived aligned. I didn't find my way because I finally conformed, or because my mother finally understood, or even because I found Theo. I found it because I stopped measuring my square footage against a life that was never meant for me. I stopped shrinking in rooms I was meant to lead. At Revenge Sins, we notice when a story doesn't end with a bang or a bitter victory, but with the profound power of a woman standing exactly where she belongs. If this story stayed with you, it's because you know that some homes aren't found, they are built. One brave decision at a time. I turned off the kitchen light and followed the sound of Nora's laughter into the heart of my home.